Hello and welcome to session 4 on our wellbeing journey. And so far we've looked at both our wellbeing mindset and our physical well-being. And today we're looking at our emotions. And for a lot of us, when you say well-being, actually you immediately think emotions. Do I feel happy, sad, content? Am I feeling positive or negative at the moment? And I guess the big question, is there anything I can do to take control of these, or are they just purely chemical reactions in my brain? Joanna, how are you feeling today?
Oh, Simon, I feel good.
I knew that shit now.
Oh, yeah.
So good.
I don't know where that came from. No, Simon, I'm feeling really good. I'm eating an apple because last week we did physical well-being and I was going to have a cookie, but I'm being good. So here it is. Do you know what? Our emotions are so important. Has there ever been a moment where you've just reacted and responded completely irrationally, didn't even have all the facts, and before you know it, you're having a terrible day and your emotions have just taken over? I mean, I know I have. There is totally no magic fix for this, but is there a good level of emotional health that we can get? Maybe there is. We're going to talk about it today. But first, we're off to speak to Dan, who's going to tell us his story. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your story?
And when I was 17, I suddenly had quite a rough experience of anxiety. I went to a concert and suddenly had a panic attack, which was like the first time I'd ever had one. I didn't really know what was going on at all, and suddenly was overcome with this sense of fear and anxiety. And I remember just at that moment thinking I was going to die. Kind of thought that was it at that point, which was very overwhelming, very scary, and quite terrifying. Eventually, that lasted for about 4 years, at that kind of heightened time. Just didn't really know what to do and felt really lost.
And how did that change? What changed?
That change really happened in, I guess, 2018. I'd just gone for a breakup, and whilst it was I didn't feel like I needed that. I actually was really attached to that relationship. But actually, that was the kick to, I guess, restart. Just felt the urge to try and get better. I started to running, which really helped with my emotional well-being, I guess, and suddenly started to make me feel a lot more positive about that experience. And along with that, I was invited to church by a friend, which never in a million years did I think I'd set foot in a church. And I went along, and it was so helpful. There was so much change in me. What I did feel was a really big sense of hope that things were going to get better and things were going to change.
Yeah, and what about now? How do you cope with your emotional well-being?
The thing with anxiety is it 100% can go away, and it will, and I'm still so confident of the fact that eventually it will kind of dip below a level where it doesn't really come back anymore.
That's great. Dan, thanks so much for sharing with us. That was awesome.
Wow, what a story. You know, fear is such a powerful emotion. It can completely paralyze us. But hearing Dan's journey with this and how he's learned to manage some really tough times in his life gives me a hope for all of us in need of improving our emotional well-being. It is possible. Right, I'm off to London now. I'm going to be catching up with Will van der Haar. Will is the founder of Mind and Soul Foundation, which aims to educate, equip and encourage people around the whole topic of mental health. Why do emotions matter so much?
Well, emotions are language that enables us to articulate our experience. And we all have emotions because emotions are also in the heart of God. John 11:35, Jesus wept. It's the shortest verse, for me, the most comforting verse in the Bible, because it's saying actually God knows. He emotionally articulates experience. And we, as we go through life, emotionally articulate our experience. It's the way we converse and connect. It's a bit like taking the temperature in a pool. It's too cold, or it's too hot. You can't condemn the thermometer for expressing its experience in the water. And for us, we We experience, moments of anger, deep grief, deep joy, happiness. Those emotions, they articulate our experience in life, and they're God-given, they enable us.
But why sometimes when we are articulating some of those emotions, do we end up feeling bad for doing exactly that?
Well, obviously we're socialised into believing that some of the emotions that we're having are good emotions. And we label more difficult feelings as bad feelings, when actually they're not bad. They're no worse than saying the temperature is hot or the temperature is cold. Emotions that we call bad often help us to articulate difficult experiences. So if you lost a loved one, as you have, grief is a really important emotion that enables us to articulate what that loss actually looks like. Actually, not grieving would be more problematic than grieving.
Yeah.
Not emoting is more of a problem than emoting a little too much. And what does too much look like? It rarely looks like too much emotion. It's normally about the action that flows out of the emotion. So when we feel angry, we should feel anger fully. Anger and happy are actually two sides of the same emotion, but it's what we do with the anger that's important.
If we don't allow ourselves to have the freedom to express whatever given emotion we're feeling at the time, what are the possible negative impacts on us?
Well, psychologists always talk about three evils, and they're suppression, repression, and denial. So this is the idea that actually we either consciously or unconsciously force down the emotions that we're experiencing. And if emotions are an ability to articulate our experience, effectively what we're doing is we're becoming disconnected from the real experiences that we're having. And that is problematic for a number of reasons. It's problematic socially, because actually we're living in denial of other people's emotional experiences and reactions. It's problematic personally because actually we've lost sight of our own reality. And it's problematic in terms of our growth because we're failing to acknowledge that we've gone through a particular season of difficulty. So I think an important part of emotional well-being is acknowledgement and connection with the reality of our struggles as well as our joys. Ultimately, I believe God's called us to flourish, and flourishing is about growing and being aware of ourselves in any setting to manage life's challenges in a way that continues to facilitate our growth. Most people experience difficult seasons in life, and their resilience is a measure of their ability to continue to grow through those experiences. Doesn't mean those experiences are easy, it means that they are continuing to grow through those experiences.
We know that it's healthy to be able to express our own emotions. When you're dealing with people who are struggling to do that, how do you encourage people to express themselves more emotionally?
To be honest, I would say the most fundamental means by which we might grow in emotional expression is by sitting with people who actually want to listen to us.
Right, yeah.
Internally, the primary narrative that people experience is, I'm being silly and no one wants to know how I feel. And so what we tend to do, particularly this is a very British narrative, is push down emotion because emotion is humiliating, project false strength as if I'm not moved by my experience, and hopefully, I can get through by being a kind of closed book. That's not helpful. What is helpful is sitting with people who actually want to listen, who want to listen non-judgmentally, and want to give you an opportunity to articulate how you feel with helpful questioning. And being fully alive emotionally, it's not about having loads and loads of really heady, wonderful emotions all the time. It's about being fully aware of all of the emotions that I'm having. If I had a message, maybe particularly to men, but to women too, about the emotions, it's to recognise that emotions aren't a judgment against you, they're a blessing for you to be able to articulate your life fully, a full life, which is interpreted emotionally, spiritually and physically. The key thing is, are we being authentic to the way in which God has created us?
So Will has been mentioning how our emotional well-being can have a very serious impact on the rest of our lives. And as we keep on coming back to, all of these things are connected. Our physical well-being, our emotional health, our mindset are all connected. One impacts the other, which can impact another. Now, I guess you're probably like me, we can all at times feel just that little bit low, but how do we get out of too much negative thinking? How do we tip the scales back into being a little bit more positive? Well, you might remember that in session 1, we spoke to Dr. Roger Bretherton, who's the senior lecturer in psychology at Lincoln University. And Joe has been back to see him to check out the sights of Lincoln, but also speak to him about the power of positive thinking. Meanwhile, I'm off to Stoke Newington to catch up with Rosemary.
Hey, Joanna.
Hi, Roger. So good to see you
Yeah,
again.
good to see you again.
You even got me a hot water.
Indeed, yeah,
You
straight
remembered?
there. I know, I remembered your drink.
Thank you. Now, Lincoln, I'm back.
You're back. How's your well-being journey going?
Going well, but last time you told me that Lincoln was beautiful. It is beautiful, but it's wet.
Yeah.
Is that a Lincoln thing?
Well, it's a good job we're going to talk about positive things today, isn't it? Because I
Yeah.
think you might need to hear about them.
Well, today we're all thinking about our emotional well-being, and I know this is kind of your area of expertise, isn't it? So I've got some questions for you.
Sure.
Okay, are you ready?
Yep.
Right, now, so sometimes when I wake up in the morning, you can wake up just feeling a certain way, and I just noticed that my emotions can shape my day. So whether that's good or bad, it can just, if I don't kind of catch what I'm thinking or feeling, it can just really send my day off in a certain direction. Talk to me about positive and negative emotions.
Well, that's it, isn't it? That our emotions affect every part of us. You know, some psychologists say we're always in a mood. That's what it means to be human. You know, you've always got kind of your emotions going on.
Yeah.
If you think about the emotions we usually think as bad or negative, so things like shame, fear, anger, etc. The reason we call them bad is because they have really, really strong action tendencies attached to them. That's what psychologists call it. So shame wants to hide, fear wants to run, anger wants to fight. And they're designed to do things for us really, really quickly, get things done. But then our positive emotions don't have those. So when you start thinking about things like gratitude, gladness, peace, awe, serenity, all those kind of positive things, they don't have those things attached to them. In fact, what happens when you feel good emotions, positive emotions in those ways, is firstly your awareness broadens. So it's almost like you become bigger as a result of having those emotions. And then secondly, they build you. So when the bad stuff comes your way, if you've had a moment of hope or a moment of love, a moment of gratitude, you're going to be able to deal with those difficult things so much better.
How does our kind of attitude to life in general affect our emotional well-being?
That's a great question, because our attitude very often kind of contains an emotion on some level. So there's quite a famous psychology experiment that's been done right across the country over the last few years called Attitude for Gratitude.
Okay.
And it's basically saying that if we, for example, practice gratitude daily in really simple ways, 3 blessings, compare how today was to maybe a day that was worse, and be glad about the good things that we've seen. I mean, the research over and over and over and over again says that if you take on a grateful attitude like that, not only does it do you psychological good, not only does it do you physical good in terms of its affects all kinds of heart rate and all kinds of things like that, but also if you're doing that over time, it's actually shown to improve all kinds of elements of your life in all kinds of different ways.
That is incredible.
I know, it's mad,
That
isn't it?
really,
It's crazy.
I'd never made that connection before. Okay, when life is not going so well,
Yeah.
and you just feel just a bit, just bleak, and you're just losing kind of hope. What can we do?
Well, I like the fact that you said losing hope, because weirdly, hope is the very thing we need to pick up in moments where things feel bleak. So that's the weird thing about hope, that hope kind of comes into play in the very moments where you feel a bit despairing and a bit hopeless.
Right.
And the research seems to suggest that hopeful people believe 4 things. Basically, they believe that the future is better, that we have to bring that about in some way, that you and I have a contribution to bringing about that better future. There's loads of ways of getting there, so get really creative. What are all the different ways that you can make today better?
Right.
But then fourthly, all those ways are going to involve frustration, difficulty, effort in some way.
Yeah.
So that's what makes hope different from optimism. So optimism is waking up and going, I feel a bit bad, but today's going to be better. Hope is, I'm actually going to work and be quite strategic today about bringing about that better world.
Okay, so give me just something really practical that I could really put kind of being grateful and that sense of hope into practice.
Yeah. So one of the best ways of practicing hope is actually to think about how can you bridge between what you're doing today and where that's going to lead you in the future. So this works in all kinds of contexts. Hope bridges from, I'm doing this right now, but what I want to imagine is what happens when this finishes. When this is done,
Okay.
what's that going to be like? What will this living room be like when I've
Yeah.
finally finished decorating it?
Yeah.
What will work be like when I've finally got this bit of paperwork off the table? What will this relationship be like when we finally sort out some of the stuff we're working through at the moment? So that's one really good way of using hope, is actually to project ourselves into the future.
Nice, I really like
Yeah.
that. So how is love kind of connected?
One of the understandings of love in psychology is something called positivity resonance. The fact that we're kind of relating and talking to each other. If you stuck us both in a brain scanner right now, what you'd discover is that our brains are mirroring each other, because we're connecting and we're thinking and we're sort of working together. And the weird thing about that positivity resonance is that not only does it feel good now to make the connection, but it will leave us feeling good for a large part of the day. That everybody we speak to after this, they'll catch it, and anyone they speak to, they'll catch it too. And so it sort of ripples through social networks in that way.
That is really powerful.
And if you keep exposing yourself to that, so if you keep, adopting a loving attitude in some way, keep doing that, it has all kinds of health benefits. Illnesses get better quicker. It leads to better heart rate, and all just so many different things go on because we have those loving moments.
Thank you so much, Roger. It's always really good to chat to you. I've got so much to take away.
Oh, it's great to hear. Good to see you, Joanne. I've got to get back to work anyway, so hope to see you again.
Yeah, definitely. See you in Lincoln.
Take care.
Wow, that was an amazing chat with Roger. I just love everything he said, but particularly that thing of my physical well-being being linked to my gratitude. I'd never thought of that before. And I think a lot about exercise and healthy eating, but if I can actually address the way I think, that's actually going to help my physical body too. But I'm going to sit here and I'm going to take a moment to actually think, hopefully, about what's coming next before I rush back to the studio.
Joe, you relax, just enjoy. We all need a bit of TLC. Now, I've come here to North London and we're going to talk a bit about emotional well-being, and I'm with Rosemary, who's going to talk about her own journey and why it's so important for her. And Rosemary, first of all, tell us a little bit about what exactly you do.
So I work as a clinical psychologist. I do a mixture of private work and NHS work. My clinical work involves working with people with mental health conditions such as anxiety, depression, trauma, adjustment, bereavement, different things.
So you're clear about putting those boundaries in between that working time and your own time, but we live in an increasingly busy world. Lots of demands on our time, whether we're at home or whether we're at work. How do you slow down, and how important is it to your own emotional well-being that you slow down?
Yeah, I agree. I think time pressure is on us like never before. But this thing of slowing down, I feel sometimes people can make themselves a bit too busy because they feel a bit frightened of slowing down and paying attention to what else might be going on. And I think sometimes when you slow down, you notice things or you remember things, and that can feel threatening or uncomfortable. So especially as a psychologist, you've got to be able to do that for yourself.
How good for our well-being is being present in the moment? In some ways, we lost the ability, the art of doing that, and how important are those moments?
A lot of this talk that's around now about being present in the moment, like it comes from sort of this idea of mindfulness and being there for things. As a Christian, I find it's more having the time for prayer that I find key. So it's not necessarily, we're all living busy lives. It might not be that you can do hours and hours, but I think taking moments of my day where I can turn my attention to God and connect. So it's not so much being present in the moment, but it is about connection. It's that being present with God that makes a difference there.
What do you say though to those people who just say being busy, working hard, never switching off, it's just in my DNA, this is who I am, this is how I operate, this is when I feel at my most comfortable, my most productive, and I don't like silence, I don't like stopping. What are the possible consequences for people who just find that so difficult to do?
Yes, absolutely. And I think, different strokes for different folks, and I think everyone is different and unique, so you have to find something that works for you. So maybe it's not being busy or overloaded, but it's being in action, it's having an activity. So that might be enjoying the outdoors, it might be running, it might be pursuing something, and for them that is restful, that's playful, that's enjoyable. For other people it might be silence and stillness that brings the rest. And I think it's being open to experimenting with different ways of recharging. And I think, you know, in your question, I think there is that sense of that there's the potential for burnout, there's a potential for people to be so depleted, and there is that pressure. I think the modern lives we're living, where there's a lot of technology, there's a lot of having to be switched on all the time.
It's pretty clear in the Bible where God stands on work and rest. You know, on the seventh day, God rested. But do you think, as Christians and as people actually, we've lost sight of the importance of a day of rest?
I think that's becoming increasingly hard. So if you think now shops are open, it's busier, Sundays are busier, you have more options open to you to fill that day in the same way you would a Saturday or any day Monday to Friday. God's heart behind that was to give us a gift, to give us joy, to give us rest and peace, and so do things that work for you on that day.
Rosie, thank you so much. Honestly, I've got so much to think about. I mean, I've got to head down south now to catch up with Joe, but there's lots for me to think about. And I just know in this whole area of creating time for yourself and as a parent, it's so important. But yeah, it's not always easy, but thank you so much.
Great, thanks.
All right, there it is. Come on, old boy, keep going. That's it. Good on you, sir. Oh, actually running it.
I know, but it's been a long day.
It's been a ride, this one, hasn't it? Let's be honest.
It has. It's been a journey, and it is a journey, and you guys are on it. We're on it, and we're absolutely loving it, aren't we?
Brilliant.
Now, this week it's been all about our emotions, and something that really struck me was the idea of, you know, when we're grateful, how that can really positively shape our emotions. It's just such a simple thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think there's something you can do about this, because I did this with my boy Ethan. It wasn't my idea, by the way, but it was a gratitude jar. So the idea is once a day, you just write something you're grateful for. It can be something very simple like, my cereal was really nice this morning, which he did put in the jar. And then after a month, you look back. And I think it works for us grown-ups as well.
Yeah.
Because it's just worth reminding ourselves that even when we go through some really tough things and it's been a rubbish month, a rubbish few weeks, go back into that jar, pick out, and you will find that even throughout a tough period, there were moments when you had stuff to be grateful for, and that can change anything. So I just encourage you, do something practical.
Next time on the Wellbeing Journey, we're looking into spiritual well-being. We'll be heading to Guildford, London, and also getting some thoughts from across the pond in the USA. We'll see you then.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wellbeing Wednesday. We have a real special guest tonight, and we've been talking around well-being with our mental health, and I'm so honored to have Pastor Kayla Stoecklein with us all the way from California, America, and she's going to be sharing her story this evening. And in 2018, Pastor Kayla lost her husband, Andrew, pastor of Inland Hills Church in Chino, California, to suicide. And in the wake of this tragedy, she's embarked on her own journey to better understand this harrowing battle with mental illness, and really ultimately to help people overcome the stigma around suicide. So a huge welcome, Kayla. In fact, would you put your hands together and welcome Kayla Stoecklein to Soul Church this evening? First of all, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. So honored to be sitting down and chatting with you guys today.
Oh, we're so honored. And thank you for giving us your time. And, you know, she's got 3 young sons, Smith, Jeffro, and Brave. And, you know, we've been kind of following your story since this tragic event. And then you released your book last year, Fear Gone Wild. And it really has been a help to, I know, a lot of people in the States and the UK. And I said to Chantel, it would be great to, if we could, to have you come and be part of our Wellbeing Wednesday series. So we're so grateful that you would be part of it. And also, you know, you were introduced by our good friends, Pastors David and Jackie Cameron at Refuge Church in San Antonio. So a big welcome to Soul Church, and thank you for showing so much courage and bravery over the last 2 or 3 years. So would you just maybe begin with sharing your story with us, Kayla?
Yeah, so about 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, I was living my dream life. I mean, I really had everything I could have ever asked for and more. I was married to my dream guy. We were leading a large, thriving, growing church together. He was the lead pastor of the church. We had these 3 sons together, and we had had our fair share of trials. His dad had passed away in 2015, and he was the lead pastor and had started the church when my husband was 3. So we had walked through grief, but we were kind of coming out the other side, and Andrew was leading strong and we were doing well. And then in the fall of 2017, Andrew got sick, seemingly out of nowhere. He started having panic attacks, these very debilitating panic attacks. They were happening 3 to 4 times a week. And if you've ever seen a panic attack or witnessed a panic attack or had a panic attack yourself, you know how terrifying they can be. It was a full body experience. It really was. It's where I got the title of my book, Fear Gone Wild. It's described as fear gone wild. It kind of just takes over the whole body. And so he was having these 3 to 4 times a week. We didn't know where they were coming from. We didn't know what was happening. And we were seeing doctors trying to get to the bottom of it. And he struggled from about October 2017 until April 2018. And it was in April that he had a massive panic attack that led him to the hospital. And it was there in the hospital room that we all decided, you know, enough is enough. This guy has been leading strong. He's led our church and our family through grief. Maybe he's just tired. You know, the doctors couldn't find any reason why the panic attacks were happening. There was no physiological reason why they were happening. And so we're like, maybe he's just tired. Maybe he needs a sabbatical. Maybe he just needs some time off work. And so we put him on this sabbatical, this unexpected sabbatical. And it was just a few weeks into the sabbatical that we were sitting in a psychiatrist's office, and the psychiatrist turned and looked at me and said, "Your husband has depression." And it was shocking. I mean, it really, for me, it really was shocking and stunning. My husband, in my eyes, was this strong, resilient man who rose to the occasion every time. And so I really didn't see it coming. And Andrew was relieved. He was relieved to have a diagnosis. He was relieved to finally know what was going on inside of his body. And he and the doctors are both very hopeful that he was on the low end of the spectrum, and with rest and medication and time off work, that he would be back to work in no time and be back on his feet in no time and be fine. And so that summer, you know, from April to August, we rested. Andrew rested and wrestled with depression, and it was very difficult. Our boys were very young at the time. They were 5, 4, and 2. And so I was kind of torn between being caretaker for Andrew and mother to our children. And Andrew, I never knew who I was going to get coming out of the bedroom in the morning. I didn't know if he would be angry, if he would be sad, if he would be full of anxiety, if he would be happy. Every day was different. And there was also a spiritual warfare component that was happening that caused a lot of confusion and chaos in Andrew's mind, and kind of just added to the depression that was already happening. And so at the end of July, the doctors actually thought he was getting better, and Andrew thought he was getting better too. And so they released him to go back to work. And he went back to work on August 1st and hit the ground running and gave 2 powerful messages on mental illness. He really wanted to use his story to help others. And so he talked about depression. He talked about suicide. He gave out the suicide hotline number. He gave out statistics from the NAMI website. I mean, he knew the facts. He would have known where to go for help. And it was so well received. I mean, really at the time, not a lot of pastors were talking about it. It still was kind of a taboo topic in the church. And Andrew was brave. He was courageous. He was willing to talk about it. He was willing to go there, and he was willing to be vulnerable. And so it was very powerful. And then headed into the 3rd weekend, he just had a really bad day at the office. You know, he wasn't fully well. His mind wasn't fully healed. He described to our church and our family that he was at about 65%. He wasn't at 100%. He was hoping to ease back into ministry and kind of get back to 100% over time. And so we had this really bad day, and it kind of just threw him into a whirlwind. And so our family and our staff kind of knew right away, okay, maybe this guy's not as well as we thought he was. Maybe he needs some more time off work. Maybe we need to take a couple steps back. Maybe he needs to go to an inpatient place. Maybe we need to try something else. And so while we were away from him for just a little bit, he attempted suicide. And it was shocking. It was absolutely shocking, absolutely stunning. I mean, really something that was never on the table for me. I really thought that was never a possibility, could never happen, especially to Andrew. And so he was rushed to the hospital, and they ran a bunch of tests, and unfortunately there was nothing they could do. And so God gave us the gift of one last day with him, and we got to be there in the hospital with him and hold his hand and play his favorite worship songs and pray with him and lay with him. And it was a beautiful gift to have that time to say goodbye. And so on August 25th, 2018, he took his last breath. And with that, I was handed this brand new life as a widow and single mom of these 3 young boys, and really a life that I never saw coming.
Wow.
Gosh, thank you for sharing that. I know that's going to help so many people, just you sharing that journey.
Yeah, Kayla, you talk quite openly in your book about the myth of suicide being selfish. And could you speak into that a little? I'll be totally honest, quite frank, I have said that. Okay, I've said that because I haven't had the experience, maybe the empathy I need. And so, you know, I've heard so many people who say, how could someone with a beautiful family or a beautiful life, you know, take their own life? I mean, can you talk into that for us a little bit?
Yeah. And I just want to empathize with you and say, I've said that too. And I share about in the book a conversation I had with Andrew. There was one moment over that summer sabbatical that he had where we were sitting at the kitchen counter. It was late at night. I was exhausted. I mean, I was really run down. And I was explaining to him how I was feeling tired and I was feeling like I was carrying so much. And his response back to me was that he was up in the middle of the night last night and he had all his staff organization charts spread all over the counter and he thought about killing himself. And my reaction to that admission was, Andrew, that is the most selfish thing you could ever do. You would never do that to me and the boys. I can't believe you even said that. Like, just shame, 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 shame. And I just reacted out of my own emotion because I was so empty. And now I know that there's a better response. And the better response is to lean in. The better response is to ask questions like, do you have a suicide plan? What problem are you trying to solve through suicide? When and how would you do it? It's to take it seriously. You know, in that moment, I wish I would have leaned in, asked those questions. And then as soon as we were done with the conversation, I wish I would have picked up the phone and called the suicide hotline and just said, hey, my husband said this to me. What should I do? I wish I would have told his doctors. There's just a different way to approach a conversation like that. But that word selfish is tied to suicide so often. And what I've learned now in hindsight and my experience and what I've gone through and just digging in after he passed away, trying to better understand how did this happen. His psychiatrist, I'll never forget his psychiatrist telling me after Andrew passed away that 90% of suicides are impulsive. It really is this in the moment, overwhelming pain. It is a pain problem. It's overwhelming psychological pain that we cannot understand unless we've been there ourselves. Anne Voskamp, she's a beautiful author and writer, and she wrote this blog and she described it as being in a burning building and the only way to escape the flames is to jump out of the window. And so that explanation for me just gave me so much empathy for Andrew. It's like he was in overwhelming pain and he did not want to die. He just wanted his pain to end. And so I've even changed the language that I use with the word suicide. I don't say committed suicide. I don't say killed himself. I say died by suicide. And it takes that shame and blame off the person that died. You know, it's not Andrew's fault. It's not the doctor's fault. It's not the medication's fault. It's not my fault. It's not anybody's fault. It's a tragedy. It should have never happened and no one is to blame. And he died by suicide. He didn't choose to take his own life. And that's really helped me. And I think it's going to help my children as they get older too, and they understand more layers of what happened with their dad, for them to see him with compassion and to know, you know, he was overwhelmed with pain and he didn't want this to happen as much as we didn't want it to happen. And so flipping the script like that has been so helpful for my healing journey.
I think the way you've unpacked that there is going to help a lot of people in our church, our city, and those who are watching. So thank you for being so open there. And I think people can get caught up in thinking that mental illness is spiritual warfare. Again, you talked about this in your book. and rather than a medical illness. What are some practical steps to understand this more, Kayla?
Yeah, I think that's what is confusing about mental illness. And I think that's what, for so long, they have been tied together, especially in the church. We think it's this demonic, evil thing, and that we can just pray it away. And that if you spend enough time in the Bible and you pray enough and you spend time with God, and that you're morally making good choices, that like this shouldn't happen to you. And that's just completely not true. And for us, it really was a combination of both. There was like real spiritual warfare happening in our home. I have a whole chapter in the book called Stranger Things that talks about these encounters that Andrew had with what he described as creatures, with what he described as this dark presence, and he felt like they were after him. And he even had this really intense experience in our bedroom one day that I describe in the book as well, where he saw things and they were talking to him, and they had names like anxiety and depression and success. And he really was terrified. And so it really was a part of our journey. But I would say it was just a part. I mean, there was still this real physical illness. And I think that's important to understand, that it's not all spiritual. I think we are spiritual beings, so there always will be a spiritual component to everything. But it was a real physical illness. So understanding that mental illness is a real physical illness. There's a real chemical imbalance happening in the brain. Scientists are able to look at the brain and see that when someone's struggling with depression, there's a real physical illness happening in the brain. And so it's so helpful to understand that and just know, everyone's journey with their mental health is going to be different. Everyone's healing journey is going to be different. Sometimes supernatural prayer is healing, and people are prayed for that are struggling, and all of a sudden their depression's gone, and that's beautiful and that's amazing. But that doesn't work for the next person. Maybe it's medication for the next person, and they finally found the medication that works, and they stay on that medication for years. I mean, it's not black and white, it's all gray, and what works for you may not work for me. And so it's just such a unique journey for everybody. And so I think it is having an awareness that there is a spiritual component, but it's not putting the spotlight on that, and also understanding there's a real physical thing happening in our body as well.
Wow, this is so helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you. You talk a lot in the book about the link between isolation and mental health illness. Now, we are, as I speak, in a lockdown. We think it's going to be around a 6 to 12 week lockdown. We're not sure. Wow. This is week 2 as we're recording it. But the reality is people are struggling.
Yeah.
People are isolated. It's dark. It's cold here in Europe. And, how important is community right now for people? We know it's only a virtual community, but, how important from your experience with Andrew is people staying and having community?
I'm just so sorry. That's really hard to be locked down for that long. I think it is. I think it's vital. I think it's vital for all of our mental health, whether you have a pre-existing mental health condition or not. I think it's vital for all of us to find creative ways to stay in community right now during this time that doesn't have an end date on it. It's hard because we don't know when it's going to get better, when we're going to go back to normal, or when the lockdowns are going to be done. But I think that we can be creative in finding ways. And I'm so grateful for technology, and that we can sit here and have this Zoom call, me in California and you guys in England. And, I think it's doing that with our friends. It's saying, hey, let's have a Zoom call tomorrow night after the kids go to bed, and just sit and talk and catch up and be able to see each other face to face, even if it's through a computer. I think it's going for walks. I don't know if you guys are allowed to go for walks outside, but I know when we had our stay-at-home order, we were allowed to do that. And maybe even just seeing a neighbor while you're going for a walk outside can be so helpful, just seeing another person. But I think we get stuck. I think isolation is a trap, and we get stuck in it, and we have to make the conscious decision to choose to crawl out of it, to choose to say yes to those things, to choose community. And I know a lot of churches, I don't know if you guys are offering this, I'm sure you are, but a lot of churches are offering virtual communities as well. I know the church I'm a part of has virtual small groups. And so maybe it's hopping in a virtual small group and, you know, joining people that way and being able to sit and talk about what you're learning and what God's doing in your life and what's hard, and just being real and honest and vulnerable. I think that's the best thing you could do for yourself if you feel like you're in isolation. And I think being real and honest and vulnerable can help lift us out of that isolation, and we can feel seen even though we're not physically next to the people that we love.
Yeah, that's so helpful. And yes, we do. You know, we also have small groups, and staying connected that's why we're constantly saying to people, I know it's not the same. Church is not the same right now. The connections are not the same, but we can do this. And so whatever, you know, it's a lifeline. We call it the lifeline. And that's really helpful that you said that. And sort of what have you learned on the journey of, you know, supporting people through mental illness, and how can we play our part? How can we too help others on the journey as well?
Yeah, if you're walking alongside somebody who's struggling, I would say take it seriously. Like, do your best to take it seriously. If you can, try to educate yourself. And there's beautiful blogs. The NAMI website is a beautiful website that we have here in the US. I don't know if that's a worldwide thing or not. But there's beautiful resources out there. There's beautiful books, there's beautiful blogs, there's beautiful resources to help us better understand and educate ourselves when someone that we love is struggling. I just think that we can do our best to take it seriously. We can lean in. We can go with them to their appointments. I think, you know, one of the things that I missed with Andrew is I wish I would have gone with him to every single doctor's appointment. We went to therapy together for 2 hours every week, but he had these psychiatry appointments every other week, and I wasn't able to go to all of those. But I wish I would have. I wish I would have been able to be there and kind of advocate for him and be his voice and be able to tell the doctor what's really happening at home. I think it's so important to be honest with a team of professionals that's surrounding the person that you love. And I wish I would have told them that he was struggling with suicidal thoughts. I think we're so worried about embarrassing the person that we love. We're worried about shame, that we're not always honest. But I think sometimes when we're honest, we may be able to save their life and may be able to help them more. And so being able to be honest, being able to make sure someone goes with them to every appointment, educating ourselves, and then taking time for ourselves as well. You know, our mental health takes a toll as well when we're caring for somebody. And so carving out the space and time to hire the babysitter, to go take a bath or go read a book, because we can't keep pouring out if we're empty. And so taking that space and time to fill ourselves back up, because it is a long journey and it is an exhausting journey. And we have to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves too, so that we can best support the person that we love.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Kayla, you've shared so beautifully how we can support others. Can I just ask a really honest question? What are some of the things that haven't helped you? So maybe well-meaning people, because, you know, people in our church, so sadly, they've lost friends and family through suicide. And I'm also aware of sometimes we can do the wrong thing as well as trying to do the right thing. So just tell us ways that maybe aren't so helpful when someone's going through a suicidal bereavement.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's difficult. I think when someone dies by suicide, it's awkward. You know, oftentimes people don't even want to say the word suicide. They don't even talk about the word suicide. They have the service, the memorial for the person that passed away, and the word suicide's not even said. And so I think for me, it's been really helpful to be able to say that word. It's been very helpful. The way that I understand what happened too helps me to be able to say that word. It's not this shameful thing. I really do believe it was this tragic accident that should have never happened. And so I feel very comfortable saying it was a suicide. But I think being willing to talk about the person that passed away, I think so often we don't know what to say. We don't know what to do. And so sometimes we back away because we don't know what to say and we feel uncomfortable. And so we don't show up and we don't text and we don't call and we don't check in because we're afraid we're going to say the wrong thing. And so I think just pushing that off the table, like, don't be afraid to say the wrong thing. It's okay if you say the wrong thing. Likely will tell you if you're saying the wrong thing. So don't worry about that. And I think, you know, if you're thinking of an idea of something that you could do for somebody that's walking through a suicide bereavement, I think just do it. You know, if you're thinking about bringing them dinner, like just bring them dinner. If you're thinking about calling them, just call them. Just do whatever you're thinking about. And most likely that's a prompt that the Holy Spirit's putting on your heart to do for that person. So just do it. Find ways to serve them. A beautiful question that you can ask somebody that's walking through grief is, hey, how can I serve you? How can I serve you today? How can I serve your family? What can I do for you? Maybe it's something simple like taking the trash cans to the curb. You know, it can be something that's so simple that could be a really unique way to serve that family. But I think not dancing around the word suicide. I think asking questions. I think sometimes just being present. I know that's really hard right now with COVID, but maybe it's being present through a Zoom call or a Skype call or a FaceTime call, and maybe you don't even know, you don't have an agenda, you don't know what you want to say, but sometimes your presence is enough, and sometimes that person just wants to talk and just wants to vent. I think so many times on the phone after Andrew passed away, I would just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk because that was my way of processing. And so just being able to be a presence sometimes is enough. We don't always have to have the right things to say.
So
It's
precious.
really helpful.
Kayla, in just a moment, we're just going to pray. But before we do that, what would you say right now? There's a lot of people are going to be watching this and sharing this through various social media platforms, but maybe someone is having dark thoughts. Maybe someone is even considering planning this. Would you just speak to those amazing people right now?
I just first want to say I am so deeply sorry for your pain. I don't know if anyone said that to you yet, but I am so deeply sorry for your pain. And I want to let you know too, from my own personal experience, I've battled with suicidal thoughts as well since Andrew passed away. And what I've learned as I've battled with those thoughts is that living with the pain is possible. Living with the pain is possible. We can always find a way to live with the pain. And so pushing through the pain, reaching out for help. If you're struggling, pick up the phone and tell somebody, text a friend, call the therapist, reach out for somebody. There will be somebody there to pick up your call and to listen. Your life matters. Your life has value. Your life has meaning. You will get through this. Even if your pain lasts forever, you can find a way to live with it. And there is hope. The hope of heaven is waiting for us, where our pain will be gone forever. And I can't wait for that day. But until then, just keep trying to find a way to live with the pain. And I am doing that with you, and you are not alone.
Wow.
Thank you so much for that, Kayla.
Kayla, that has helped so many people, I know. And we want to extend an invitation to you. When this is lifted, we'd love to have you in England so we can meet face to face and you can share your stories. So we'd love to have you here. And we'll make you a roast dinner, okay? An English roast dinner.
Sounds great. I'd love that. Thank you so much.
But before we do that, I'd love Chantel just to pray for you and pray for those who are watching, maybe who are struggling, and pray for those who are supporting those who are going through suicidal bereavement or just struggling in their mental health. So let's take a moment just to pray. Father, thank you, Lord.
Yes, Lord, we just thank you for Kayla and her life, God, and her beautiful children and her family that surround her, Lord. Father, I thank you for the blessing that she is to not just us here at Soul Church, God, but to so many people, God, even in a season of loss and mourning, Father, that you have made her to be a blessing, Father. And so right now, God, I pray, God, that you would continue to do this mighty work in her life, Father. Just even looking at her in her eyes, Father, knowing that there is deep pain there, God, but yet she chooses, God, to honor you, Father, in every step of her life, God, every day, God, as she brings her a life's message, God, and her husband's life's message, Father. I thank you right now that you are going to use her in a mighty, wonderful way, Father. God, I thank you right now, Lord, anyone that is tuned in tonight, Father. I just pray for strength, Father, a supernatural strength to just be with them, Father. Come upon them, Lord. I pray that they would find rest in you, Lord. I thank you, Father, that you hold them so close to your heart, Lord. Father, when they feel lost and then when they feel alone, God, when they feel like everything's just in disarray and chaos, Lord, God, that you would bring them close to your heart, Father. Lord, right now, God, we're so thankful that we can actually be open enough, God, to hear, God, the journeys of people's lives, Father. God, and take into consideration everything that we've heard today, Father, knowing that with you, God, we are stronger together, God, and we can see mental illness. We can see people that are battling these thoughts of suicide, Lord, that they would be able to find peace and refuge in you, Lord. There is a way out, and that is you, Father. You will bring them, God, into that eternal peace in Jesus' mighty name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Father.
Amen. Well, thank you, Kayla. And I want to encourage everyone who's been blessed tonight and wants to hear more about Kayla's story, head, I imagine, to Amazon and pick up Fig on Wild. And I know it's going to really help. Buy a copy for someone who's maybe battling it. Let's get Kayla's story out. Send us some love on social media, on Instagram, Twitter. And come on, let's keep sharing the message that there is a way out. So thank you, Kayla. We really do appreciate you. We love you. And can't wait for our paths to cross in face-to-face very soon.
Enjoy the California sunshine.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me. It's been an honor, really.